Welcome to the 9th episode in our Round the World Low Cost Challenge, where I'm attempting to fly, you've guessed it, round the world eastbound from London Luton and back to London Luton using real world schedules in the virtual world, flying low cost airlines only. And today we're starting where we left off the last episode, and that of course is at Los Angeles LAX International. And in this sector we leave the United States north to Canada. And this is where I had a bit of a dilemma, because is WestJet really a low cost airline? It certainly used to be, but in the last few years they've gone all mainstream, especially with their 787-9 Dreamliner linking a number of Canadian destinations with Europe. They even have a very posh flatbed business class on those transatlantic services on the Dreamliner. And I know that WestJet are slowly upgrading or refurbishing all of their 737 fleet to include a premium economy up front. But let's face it folks, even the ultra low cost carrier Spirit in the United States has very posh big seats up front. But back to today's flight, we're flying north to Edmonton in Alberta on board the PMDG 737-700 in the old livery, and therefore the non-refurbished all economy, and therefore in my opinion low cost service operated by WestJet between LAX and Edmonton. I know you're asking, guys, where is the sim brief section? Well, yep, I forgot to record it, so we've already jumped up to the cockpit preparing this 737 for its flight north.
WestJet 1423 is cleared to Edmonton Airport as filed. Fly runway heading, climb and maintain altitude 14,000. Departure frequency is 121 feet. Squawk 2631.
Hello, Captain. We're ready for pushback.
Contact tower on 133.9er.
Locking gear. Departure check completed. Bypass pin inserted. Release sparking switch. Commencing push. All engines clear. Start at will.
If you're wondering why I haven't started the engines as I normally would during pushback, it's because the pushback had confused me a little. The scenery that I've got installed here for LAX in prepared 3D version 4.5 is from FS Dreamteam, and their integration with GSX Level 2 normally pushes you back out onto the taxiway. And that's what I assumed was happening here, but you know what assume really means. And in this case it meant I was completely wrong. But either way, I'd be starting the engines after pushback is complete.
Sidebar, southwest, Lake Delta 7 to go. Southwest 6.
Left is clear. Right is clear.
WestJet 1423 taxi functions point first runway 24 left using taxiway Delta 8 Echo Victor. Contact tower on 133.9er when ready.
We were going to be departing from runway 24 left here at LAX, so it was a fairly short taxi from the terminal. Based on the weather being fed into the sim by ActiveSky, this is the runway I briefed for, and certainly was the runway I expected. The only problem is, in the FS Dreamteam version of LAX, it can't be guaranteed that the scenery doesn't overwrite the weather.
WestJet 1423 cleared for takeoff. Runway 24 left, service wind 217 at 1 tree. South departure, roger. Altimeter, decimal tree. Alberta 124 decimal tree, WestJet 14235.
By the time I reached Los Angeles, I had a real dilemma with my round-the-world low-cost challenge. I ultimately needed to find a low-cost carrier that crossed the Atlantic, and that used to be fine before the pandemic when you had Norwegian and a fleet of 787 Dreamliners crossing the Atlantic from multiple US cities to multiple European cities on a daily basis. But sadly, that's not the case in 2022, and that left me with two choices. One, do I go south to Mexico, or two, do I go north to Canada? But as you know already from this episode, I'm going north to Canada. One of my plans was to fly Volaris down to Mexico City and then one of the many Mexican low-cost airlines to Cancun. If the real Airbus pilot hadn't been so busy flying Airbus A330s in the real world, I would have had him fly the flight factor Airbus A350-900 in the livery of Iberjet from Cancun to Madrid. Given that I was attempting to cross the Atlantic on the 8th of June 2022, there were several options with TUI in their Dreamliner back to the UK, and while Glasgow looked to be a real option, I did manage to find an alternative in the Airbus A330-300, and you haven't seen that in this series yet. And that's why I took the decision to fly north to Canada, because I had a real option out of Canada on board the Aerosoft Airbus A330 in the livery of a low-cost Canadian leisure airline. Answers of course can be put into the comments section below ahead of that video being published. But until then, we're currently climbing towards our cruise altitude of flight level 390 or 39,000 feet, which will put us above the myriad of thunderstorms I found on this route up to Edmonton.
Delta 2722, turn right heading 330, WestJet 142 contact Oakland. Oakland control, WestJet 142 to that flight. WestJet 142 Oakland control, roger.
This flight between LAX and Edmonton was pretty uneventful. We crossed a bit of California, then Nevada, then Idaho, and a tiny bit of Montana before crossing the border into Alberta, Canada. As we reached the top of descent, and based on the weather being fed into the simulator by Active Sky, I had a pretty good idea that I was going to be vectored towards runway 30 at Edmonton. And of course the scenery that I've got installed for Edmonton in prepared 3D version 4.5 is from FS Studios. And if you're wondering why I chose Edmonton as a stop off on this round the world low cost challenge, it was because there were very few low cost carriers operating between the United States and Canada. While plenty of the US low cost carriers would go south to Mexico and the Caribbean, none seemed to go north to Canada. I also needed to find a low cost Canadian airline that would get me across Canada to Toronto. I also wanted to find a schedule that would do it during daylight hours, which makes these videos a lot more interesting. And finally, because this low-cost challenge required me to get back to London Luton on the 9th of June 2022, I needed to find a schedule that would get me across Canada to Toronto in plenty of time to make the transatlantic flight that would leave Toronto on the 8th of June and arrive in the UK on the 9th of June. So after hours of searching, I thought that Edmonton was actually a pretty good stopping off point, and as I assumed we would be landing on runway 30.
7,000, WestJet 142 WestJet 142 turn right heading 025. Turn right heading 025. WestJet 142 going airport. Tower, WestJet 142 is 1 miles south, inbound ILS, runway 30 approach. WestJet 142 Tower, runway 30.
Compared to the last landing in LAX, I'm going to put that one down to not too bad at all. And with that, welcome to Calgary, Alberta. In the next episode, we're back in a Boeing 737 of PMDG as we cross Canada to Toronto, getting us there in time to make the transatlantic crossing back to the UK. So with 3 sectors left in this round the world low cost challenge, if you want to continue to follow the videos here on Sim Sunday, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and press the bell icon to be notified when the next video is published. So as I pull up to the gate here at Edmonton, Alberta, all that remains for me to say is thank you very much for watching, and wherever you're flying in your virtual world, don't forget to fly safe.
Round